Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. So glad to have you all with us today. Our guest is Dr. Randy Robbins, Southwest Area Manager for Provita Supplements. Randy, you've been in the feed industry for a while. Good to see you again. So, Randy, tell us a bit about Provita and your role with the company. Oh, we're having a little technical difficulty here. Sorry. Let's see if he can get. Can you hear us now, Randy? Oh, please stand by. We're just trying to, Randy can't hear me. Oh, can you? We're just working on this. We're going to be talking today about the droughts and the warm weather across the U.S. and what that means for silage quality and corn quality and what you can do from ruminant. There we go, from a ruminant feeding standpoint. So Randy, I welcomed you. You didn't hear that, so I'm going to do it again. Thank you for being here today. You are Southwest Area Manager for Provita Supplements, and you're down in the Panhandle of Texas, and you've been in the feed industry for quite some time. So give us a little bit of background on Provita and your role with the company, a little bit about your background as well, too, please.
Okay, sure. Thanks for having me today. So my background, I spent 25 years in the feed business, mostly in central Oklahoma and Texas, multi-species product development and feed formulation. The last 20 years or so, I've been in the Texas Panhandle working in the dairy industry and all aspects of feed ingredients, et cetera, from that the dairies are dealing with. So Provita Supplements, we're a European company based in Hamburg, Germany. A very research-based company. One of our mottos is that every product that we have goes through on-farm testing at our research facility prior to bringing it to the marketplace. And we're basic in a lot of different areas. Lactic acid bacteria, we're basic in that. Solid state fermentation, organic trace minerals. And so a lot of things, a lot of new areas and innovations that we have available to bring to the marketplace.
So we're hearing a lot about frequent droughts and warmer weather across the U.S. Tell us a bit about what you're seeing out there right now and how that can be impacting silage quality.
Sure. This year has been very extreme in terms of weather and in drought. If you look at the U.S. Drought Monitor, probably 2/3 or greater of the U.S. is in some type of extreme drought or an exceptional drought conditions. The state of Texas, almost 90% or so of the state of Texas is under these extreme dry conditions. It just makes things that much harder to try to manage, to try to produce. You know, these farmers, they've got massive amounts of inputs. Inputs have gone through the roof from a cost perspective, and those inputs don't go away, whether it rains or not, or if there's water available or not.
Well,
so
what you're seeing down there in Texas has been going on for a while now, right? I mean, it's not something that's just started. It's been prolonged.
Yeah, off and on for sure. We certainly deal with it in this part of the world, of the country, West Texas, Eastern New Mexico. You know, we're in a semi-arid region anyway. So, our average rainfall here is, I believe, is about 22 inches or so a year. And we can still get that much rainfall and still experience drought conditions because it's a function of when it falls. But most of our farmers in this region depend on rainfall to supplement their irrigation practices. The water in this part of the world is a problem. It's getting softer and softer, and with less water. And so we actually deal with that on an ongoing basis. But it's just been very, very extreme this year. Extremely dry. We here in the Panhandle, we've had some rain in the last few weeks, but we went almost 7 months without a drop of water. And so hot temperatures, wind, everything that you know, that you can have that reduces productivity of these forage crops.
So what concerns can be attributed to dry damaged corn stalks?
Well, so when you're dealing with heat stress corn, the first thing is the degree of it. And so your decisions on what to do with the crop will depend on the severity of the drought, the lack of water, etc. When we have conditions that we have now, our farmers are deciding to convert these into silage. You know, in this part of the world, we grow corn for silage anyway. We don't grow a lot of grain corn, some, but because of the dairies here, that's their demand. Volumes are going to be very, very low in terms of production, but the primary thing that you have to know when you're handling these drought stress crops is just what you have. Run some analysis. You need to know the moisture levels. You need to know potentially nitrate levels will be very high in heat stress crops. So the most important thing to know is what you've got left in the field, and then how that impacts normal silage making functions.
So as a nutritionist, do you recommend testing in the field or as it's coming in? What kind of testing protocol do you prefer?
Well, all of the above.
Okay.
Number one is moisture levels. Just normal silage making practices. Moisture is so critical. We have a technology today where you can go out into a field and chop up a corn stalk and actually get a moisture reading right there. And so those are just normal decision-making processes that you go through when it's time to chop even a normal crop, much less a drought or a heat stress crop. The thing about heat stress crops is that you can have just a extremely wide variety of conditions. Heat stress corn can still be as much as 80% moisture, depending on how long you leave it in the field, how mature you let it go. So you're going to have a wide variety, and it's, like I said, the best thing to do is you just have to know what you've got, and then just use basic silage making principles and management practices to do the best job. Our silage management practices don't go out the window when we're dealing with heat stress crops. We just need to know what we have, be able to plan for that, and then manage it. It's all about management is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had to do additional testing or anything like that.
The
So,
only additional testing I would do is probably get a nitrate analysis in these heat stress crops, because of the inhibition in the growth of the fodder of the plant and everything else, and also in corn, you're seeing a really small ear, if one at all. And so these guys that they put all this nitrogen on as fertilizer, and it tends to settle in the bottom part of the plant. And so if they go in and chop it knowing what your nitrate levels are from a toxicity aspect would be number one. The other thing is that in these drought crops, aspergillus or fungi and yeast and molds have a much higher affinity, and so making sure that there's not aflatoxin or some of these other mycotoxins that are in the that would be in the forage. Typically, that's going to be in the grain, um, but certainly nitrates, yeast and molds. It really makes it susceptible to secondary fermentation. So if you chopped a field, put it in a silo, there's going to be a lot of these microbes, and so the primary problem with corn silage is when you open the bunk and you expose it to oxygen. It's what we call secondary fermentation, and it causes the forage to it's exothermic. It causes it to heat up, and so as that happens, you're losing dry matter, you're losing energy, you're losing nutrients. So you sure want to put on an inoculant that manages that, and those are they're heterozygote or fermentative products that produce acetic acid. Acetate or vinegar production in the pile is the number one component that will help reduce secondary fermentation through yeast and mold activity.
So that's the best way to mitigate the effects of drought in your field and in your crop with inoculant?
Well, yes, certainly is. It not just drought products either. I mean, that we do that as part of our normal silage making practices. The number one economic factor is dry matter losses due to fermentation and or non-controlled fermentation, I guess. And so the best thing that we can do is add an inoculant that will produce acetic acid or vinegar to the tune of about, hopefully around 3%, and that will control secondary fermentation. It kills the yeast and the molds, or it controls them, and you don't get that activity upon initial oxygen exposure.
So what advice might you have for farmers when dealing with harvesting of dry, damaged corn stalks? Is there anything in particular that you would advise them on?
Sure, dry damaged, dry or heat damaged corn stalks that are kind of crunchy, I guess, or a little crunchier than normal. They're not going to pack very well. So the best thing you can do there is to reduce the chop length. And typically these forages are lower in digestibility as well, and so that will also help in the feeding process, and animals will be able to consume more of the product. They're just not going to sit there and just remain in the rumen, and for long periods of time. So the best thing to do on dry and coarse material is to reduce your chop length a little bit.
Any recommendations on what that should be? How much that reduction should be?
Oh, as much as you could probably get your chopper to do it.
Okay.
For the most part, they don't like, the shorter it is, it puts a bigger load on the choppers. But I drop it down probably 3/4, 2/3 to 3/4 of what it normally is.
What about
you don't want to get it too fine, but you certainly need to reduce that chop length.
Push it as much as you can,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. There's a big discussion. I find that very fascinating. There's a big discussion in Europe. They actually have a much smaller chop length on their forages than we do here in the U.S. And there are some folks that the longer the better. They really like that. from a nutritional perspective. And it's just like anything else, though. It's a balancing act and a happy medium. But again, the thing that you've got to have, you just have to know what you've got. Period. Mm-hmm. You need to know where your moistures are. You need to do some initial analysis and know where your digestibilities are, know where your starches and sugars are. In the wetter stuff, we're going to have much higher soluble sugars because they haven't shifted those sugars into starch. And so we're going to have much higher soluble sugars. The yeast and the molds are going to actually feed on those in a much faster and more rapidly upon oxygen exposure. So there's a lot of things that go on, but then again, it just comes back to knowing what you have, and that should be a standard just in the whole silage making process. Anyway, you need to know where you are, what your moistures are, how fast they go down or up, how fast the crop is maturing, and your fiber and your starch components. I work with a lot of dairies out in Arizona, and one of our biggest objectives is to really push the envelope on fiber digestibility especially in corn silage. We're seeing increase in milk production with higher digestibilities on the fiber side, and really not worrying about the corn and the starch component. We can buy that. We can go down the road and buy that. The number one, from my perspective, the number one limiting nutrient in the Southwest is digestible NDFD or digestible NDF 30 to these cows.
So we did have someone tune in from Europe, and he did confirm, or the person confirmed, that they do chop to a much smaller length. 6 to 8 millimeters is their chopping length in Europe. So
right, yeah,
just to confirm that.
To 9 or 10, yeah.
Yeah.
My first trip to Europe, when I started with Provita, and the very first silage pile that I saw, that was the first thing I noticed, and I was going, okay, somebody tell me why. And in Europe, one reason that they do that too is because Europe has a very big biogas industry, and a large portion of the corn silage and all of the grass silage as well that they produce go into their biogas industry. So they have a smaller chop length.
So is there a big difference in equipment? Is there equipment made for that?
No, you can do the same equipment. Yeah, you just different settings.
Yeah. So test and test and test again to see what you've got out there before you're feeding it and adjusting your ration and all of that. Any other final words?
Pray that it rains.
Pray that it rains. Well, I'm up here in northern Illinois, and we got like 3 inches yesterday. So yeah, you can should have sent some of it your direction. But yes, hope you get some rain down there, and the forage quality and the silage quality and all that starts to recover. So Dr. Randy Robbins, Area Manager for Provita Supplements. Thank you so much for sharing your insight today. Again, great to see you again. We appreciate you being here. For all of those tuning in, we thank you for participating today. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.